Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Fantasy Rodeo Picks on US Cowboy. Rodeo's classic event today, the Saddle Bronc riding. We are brought to you, of course, by Virgin Hotels Las Vegas for this, our host hotel for all things National Finals Rodeo. And with the Saddle Bronc riding, if you've heard me talk about this before, we've discussed how when you're building your fantasy rodeo team in any event, not just the Bronc riding, you want to think about it as splitting each group, each event into three tiers: your top five, your middle five, and your bottom five. And ideally, when you're building a roster of sorts, the best way to use your money across, just generally speaking, would be have a pretty even split between people from the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third in their respective events. And I think what's interesting about the Saddle Bronc riding is it splits up really, really nicely to give you a couple options in each of those thirds that I all think are very good, very productive, will win you at least $100,000 and maybe $200,000 for your team, which is really all you can ask for. So let's start obviously with the top third, with the number one guy, Ryder Wright, the reigning world champion. And I've said this before, if you are taking someone who is number one in the world standings based on how much they are going to cost, you better be pretty sure they're going to finish 1, 2, or 3 in total money in their event. And I do think Ryder Wright has a good chance to fall into that category. He placed in 9 of 10 rounds last year. He won 4 of them. He has won 4 rounds in an NFR multiple times in his career. If you go back to the middle of August, beginning on August 12th, every qualified ride that Ryder Wright has made has been at least 81 points. And if we go one step further, he had a PRCA record 65 rides of 85 points or more. However, the one thing I will say about that, about those 85 plus point rides, is it used to be in the saddle bronc riding, really in saddle bronc riding, bareback riding, I mean, bull riding, if you ride, you probably are good to go getting a check. But what I'm trying to say here is typically in the saddle bronc riding, 85 points used to be good for 4th, 5th, 6th in a round, pretty generally speaking. But this year, we jumped from 4 guys who made 40 rides of 85 plus to 12 guys in the NFR field who made at least 40 rides of 85 or more. And you can see them right there. Like I said, Zeke Thurston at 40 last year would have been 5th, or would have been 4th in the PRCA. This year, he is 12th in the PRCA in that stat. So what makes that interesting to me is you might want to go up a level. Look at guys who have a lot of 87.5 point rides, because that now is more likely than 85 points to guarantee you a check. And that transitions us nicely into our next guy, because you can see Dawson, number 2 in that stat, 25 rides of 87.5 points or more. That is 40% of his rides from the season went for at least 87.5 points. Furthermore, he averaged 85.8 points. That led the PRCA. He won the Governor's Cup. He won Puyallup. He won San Angelo. He won San Antonio, just to name a few this year. So Dawson, who has been getting better and better each season, used to ride about 75%, now rides 89%. If you're looking to not take Ryder Wright potentially, I'll just say this might be Dawson Hayes' best chance he has at a world title, and we'll see if he can seize it. And if he does seize that opportunity to win the world, he will be well worth his price of $140,000. Rolling on, continuing in this top third, because I really think all of the top 4 guys are worth taking a good long look at. Damien Brennan, we just saw it, led the PRCA in 87.5 point rides. He was second in that stat last year. Remember, too, he entered the NFR number 1 a year ago and had a pretty good NFR. Just couldn't compete with Ryder Wright down the stretch at the end of the day. But he rode, again, this year in the summer run. He rode like the number 1 man. He made $213,000 from June 18th on. He won Reno. He won Pinoca. He won Ellensburg. He won Spanish Fork. He won the Rough Rider Cup. So I list all of that out. The hottest Bronc rider down the stretch. And again, leads the PRCA in 87.5 point rides. Second in the PRCA, as you can see, as we put it up right there, in 90 point rides with 6. Dawson Hay also with 6, tied for second with him. And then our next guy, Zeke Thurston, the leader there. And for the second time in 3 years, Zeke Thurston has averaged over 85 points per ride. And if you are looking for a guy who is consistent in Las Vegas, and why I maybe love Zeke Thurston more than any of these other guys in the top 4, again, at the lowest price of these guys in the top 4, keep that in mind. What also makes Zeke Thurston great: 4th in the average in 2024, won the average in 2022, won the average in 2023. The last 3 seasons, he is 30 for 30 at the National Finals Rodeo, averaging 86.05 points. And so if he does that again this year, just what he has been, that would give him 860.5 on 10. That would give him a pretty good chance to win the average. That would win him close to $90,000, and that would be really good for your pro fantasy rodeo team. As we go back one more time to those 90-plus point rides, that is the argument for Cade Bruno, for Brody Wells. 2 guys who are really, really good. I just don't love them as much as the rest of the top 4 at similar prices. But you look at Cade Bruno, top 5 in 90-plus point rides, 4th in 85-plus point rides. Brody Wells, same deal, also with 5 90-point rides. And Brody Wells also has going for him in his NFR debut last year. He won 2 rounds, including making a 92-point ride. So don't be shocked if Brody Wells is 91 and wins a round this year, maybe even wins multiple rounds. So that's, again, those are the arguments for Cade Bruno and Brody Wells, as if they explode for 91, 92 points like we saw Cade Bruno do at the Calgary Stampede, like we've seen Brody Wells do at the NFR, like we saw Brody Wells do in Salt Lake City. If they have 2 of those big rides, that is your argument for picking them on your fantasy team. The next guy, Zach Dallas, solid, best year of his career. The problem, though, is he made his NFR debut and placed in just 1 round. And so when you sandwich him between Brody Wells, who won 2 rounds at his NFR debut last year, and then you look at a guy next at number 8 in Sage Newman, who I've just got as the beginning of my very solid pick zone, Zach Dallas just isn't quite worth the price he comes in at compared to, again, the guys around him, Cade Bruno, Brody Wells, Sage Newman, Statler Wright. However, you get to 8, 9, 10. These are my true middle third guys right here. When you've got Sage Newman, who is 7th in average score, 5th in 85-plus point rides, 5th in wins this season, and then he's also placed in 13 rounds and won 4 go-rounds over the course of his last 3 NFRs. So Sage Newman struggled in his first NFR, but then struggled in his second NFR, so his first 2 NFRs, excuse me. But it's gotten really, really good and really, really consistent the last 3 years at the National Finals Rodeo. Again, he's placed in almost half of the rounds. Statler Wright, same deal. Finishes 19th in the world in 2023, makes his NFR debut last year. He places in 5 rounds, wins round 6. He's number 9 in the world, finished 8th in the PRCA in 87.5-plus point rides, tied for 5th in 85-plus point rides. So again, you look at him right in that, starting to get into that lower price range at $60,000. That's when you start to think of a guy like Statler right there. Next one, Brody Cress, 8th in average score this year. And then the thing that really jumps off the page for Brody Cress, 50 rides of 85 plus. That ranks 2nd in the PRCA, would have led the PRCA last year. And then you're just getting one of the biggest veterans, one of the most decorated guys in this NFR field. He's been to 9 straight NFRs. He's won 3 average titles, and then he placed in 7 rounds last year. Now, we go to our kind of bottom third guys. And Weston Patterson might be a good pick. Also, to clean something up, Statler Wright would be $70,000. Brody Cress would be $60,000. I've really been thinking about that since I messed that up. But I want to make that clear before we get to Weston Patterson at $50,000, who may not have the best value of even your bottom five here, of that bottom third. That being said, he had the highest riding percentage in the PRCA this year at 95.7%, and he rode 111 horses. So anything that you needed to see, that you needed him to prove, that he needed to make happen, Weston Patterson did this year. I think that shows a lot. So I think there's a good chance for him to go 10 for 10. If he goes 10 for 10, he could very well finish 7th or 8th in the average without any sort of crazy scores. But I think he's going to be super solid, just not have those big go-round winning scores yet in his career. And I think he'll develop into that. But again, it's his first national finals rodeo. It's tough, especially in the Bronc riding field that features 13 guys who have been here before. It's tough to pick a first-timer, especially when the very next guy is Stetson Wright at $40,000. Stetson Wright, after leading the PRCA in average score in 2023 in the Bronc riding the last time he was healthy, is back again, 85.2 points, third in the PRCA in average score. Then he also has the same amount of 87.5 plus point rides as his brother Ryder. So I want to compare those two, because remember, you're getting Ryder at $150,000 and Stetson at $40,000. And if you look at it just down the line, what might be the edge for Ryder really is that riding percentage. If Ryder wins one more, if Ryder gets on one more horse or makes one more qualified ride than Stetson Wright, that's going to be very advantageous to him. But you look at average score. Stetson Wright actually has a better average score at number 12 in the world than the number one man, his brother, Ryder Wright. You look at those 85 plus point rides, 65 to 47. Remember, Stetson did go home for the last month of the year. So maybe he could have added 6, 7 more on there. 87.5 point rides, though. They're even. 90 point rides. Stetson, 4-3, has one more. Then lastly, wins, 14 for Stetson, 9 for Ryder. So that just goes to show you, in a lot of ways, Stetson Wright, at his $40,000 price, is just as good as his brother Ryder, who is the number one man in the world. Q Taylor, also making his NFR debut, rode really well down the stretch, went from outside the top 20 into the top 15 over the last 2 or 3 weeks. But again, just his NFR debut, surrounded by Stetson Wright, it's tough to advocate to pick him. Same goes for Ben Anderson. He's made the NFR a lot, just hasn't had the success that you would like to see at the NFR, has placed in just one round over the last 2 years. So just one out of his last 20 NFR rounds, Ben Anderson has come up with a check. This might be a guy. This is the other guy. So if Stetson Wright is your bottom third guy, just to review, let's go all the way back up to the top. Let's reset here. If you're looking for a top third guy, Ryder Wright, Dawson Hay, Damien, Brennan, Zeke Thurston, all solid choices. If you're looking for a middle third guy, Brody Wells could be an option, but he's the highest price. I would look to Sage Newman, Statler Wright, Brody Cress. For our bottom third guy, we already have Stetson Wright, but also look out for Lefty Holman. Struggled a little bit to get going at the NFR last year, but won rounds 9 and 10. Third in the average in 2023. Fourth in the average plus 2 go-round wins in 2022. So in his last 3 NFRs, he has won multiple go-rounds twice. He has placed in the top 5 in the average twice. And each of those 3 years, he has made between $112,000 and $192,000. And as we have said here, in order to really, really be in contention to win some of those big prizes, you need minimum $150,000 from each of your guys and gals, but probably an average of about $200,000. And so somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000, you hope some of those people are going to get up to $250,000. You hope you maybe have 2 or 3 of those 4 or 5 athletes who make $250,000 every year. But realistically, you are shooting from $150,000 to $200,000. Lefty Holman really puts you squarely in that range for a $10,000 price. And the last thing I will say before we get out of here on the Bronc riding is it's human nature. You're going down the line. You are picking in 8 events. Your 5th event is the saddle Bronc riding, which means you're kind of at a crossroads. You will know exactly after the saddle Bronc riding really what you want your strategy to be for the remaining 3 events or the remaining 4 events if you choose the saddle Bronc riding. So that's right on the middle of when you're making your picks. And so you can kind of go a bunch of different directions. But if you love a tie-down roper, you love a barrel racer, you love some bull riders, and you're not sure you have the salary to get them, that's when you can really look at a guy like Lefty Holman for $10,000 and see what you can do with the rest of your funds. Same type of deal for Stetson Wright. And so that's why I would look long and hard at some of these bottom third guys. Because again, it'll just give you a little more peace of mind when you start looking at the tie-down roping. And maybe that frees up room for you to take a Riley Webb, a Stetson in the Bulls, a Kai Hamilton in the Bulls, a Cassie Mowry, if that's something you want to do. So just consider the strategy portion, because remember, by the time you get to the saddle bronc riding, you really have got to start being smart with your money. Or you may have to go back and edit some things up top. And so just, again, keep that in mind. You are building a roster within the confines of the rules. That does not mean you can necessarily always pick even the people you think are going to do the best, which is why having a 15th ranked guy in your lineup may be beneficial. So that is your saddle bronc riding fantasy rodeo breakdown. Thank you to Virgin Hotels Las Vegas. Thank you for watching. Continue to spread the word as we continue to push this thing toward the National Finals Rodeo. But until then, we will see you all throughout Thanksgiving week with more fantasy rodeo updates, with more No Huddle rodeos to give you some content, some stuff, some rodeo things to break down with your family at the dinner table. You can talk fantasy rodeo picks. You can talk previews. You can talk a whole bunch of stuff. You will be smarter if you watch every one of these videos. And in order to get these videos as soon as they come out, you can subscribe, you can hit the bell, you can like, and you can make sure we stay in your algorithm and stay in everyone's algorithm, because we would very much appreciate that. But until then, we keep rolling on toward the National Finals Rodeo, and we will see you with more No Huddle Rodeo and more fantasy rodeo updates throughout this week.